What if you found a new way of watching your favourite show? The plot and the characters are the same, but the meaning is completely different. And what if the way you thought about movies was never the same again? Are you willing to take that chance? Welcome to Abstract Nonsense, the Fan Theories and Alternate Readings podcast. My name is Joe Lewis, and I'm joined today on a very special episode, one that he's been very excited about. It's the man himself, the man, the legend, the fame, the celebrity. It's Anthony Boyle.
Hey Joe.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very excited to be talking about a show that I know next to nothing about. I'll admit freely.
Joe. You know enough. You know enough to do enough, I say.
And it's Star Trek. We're talking about Star Trek Next Generation specifically, though I know a few of your theories that you've come up with and your alternate readings, as we do on this show. We talk about fan theories and alternate readings. They're from Star Trek Next Generation, one of your favourite TV shows of all time.
Yes, that is correct. It is. Yes, that's right, Joe.
Great.
It is one of my favourite TV shows of all time, is Star Trek Next Generation, and generally the Star Trek universe is something that I've thoroughly enjoyed growing up watching. I used to actually go to Star Trek conventions with my mother. Well, more, I was taken to them by my mother, who loved going to them.
Does she still go?
No, she doesn't, but she went sometimes. It's pretty cool.
How come she doesn't go anymore? Is she sick of it?
I don't know. They just they don't go. They just don't have them. They become this pop culture bloody supernova event.
Oh, look at me!
Look at me! I'm wearing a bloody sword on my back. I'm Cloud. Fucking, come on, please. All right, please get a phaser, please. Come on.
All right. Well, phases aside. Well, not aside. Phases to the front and center.
Exactly.
We're talking about Star Trek Next Generation. Give us a 2-sentence intro to Star Trek Next Gen.
So, Star Trek: The Next Generation carries on from the original series, where essentially it follows the crew of the USS Enterprise D as they basically derp around the Alpha and Beta quadrant of the Milky Way galaxy, finding new aliens. And it's basically an Alien of the Week style story with the, I guess, overarching season-long stories. And it's basically Discovery. I don't know how to describe it. Think of it as the age of Discovery in space with lasers and a really awesome Professor X, but not in a wheelchair. So, Jean-Luc Picard, one of the most famous captains of all time.
Yes.
The best captain from Starfleet, by far.
Okay.
Yeah. And he commands the Enterprise, and they go on having adventures every week.
The way that I was told to describe Star Trek, I'd never seen an episode until we went to do this, but the way it was described to me was it was originally pitched as a wagon trail in space. So the old Western wagon trails in space, and things happen. And one of the things, me not being a specifically Star Trek person, but I can very readily recognize the theme song to Star Trek Next Gen. It's one of these, It's a theme song like Stargate SG-1 or like Jag. It's one of these ones that grab your attention, pull you in.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
I thought the theme song is probably one of the best in the entire of all the Star Trek series. They all have their own distinct sound to them, but Star Trek: The Next Generation is by far the best of them.
Okay.
And it's got a very it's an instantly memorable soundtrack.
Yes.
Or an instantly memorable theme song. It is the song of Star Trek, even though other ones have sort of replaced it, or there's been other shows they have a mild variation of it, like in Deep Space Nine and Voyager it's different, or in Enterprise where the guy fucking sings. He sings in Enterprise. He's like, it's terrible. Everyone agrees it's terrible, but this is not terrible. This is fantastic. This is the high point of television theme songs. If I said to someone, get me a top 10 list of theme songs, this would be up there in the top 3. I guarantee it.
Probably not in mine.
Well, of course it wouldn't be in your top 3. Yours would be bloody something by Ingmar Bergman or something.
Ingmar Bergman.
Yeah, Ingmar Bergman, yeah.
Yes. You threw me off. So let's get down to brass tacks. Well, look at me.
I see what you did. Yeah.
Doing fancy things. So Anthony's going to kick us off with a little theory we like to call, why is there no money in the future? There should be money. God damn it. Taxation is theft.
Yes, something along those lines. Taxation is the rightful appropriation of goods by the government, Joseph, and you know that. Come on.
We're talking about no money in the future.
Yeah.
So paint the scene for us, Anthony. There's no money in the Star Trek universe. Why?
Well, there's no money in the Federation. So in the future, in the Federation, there is no currency, is the best way of describing it. There is value, there seems to be, but within the Federation itself, like most space shows will have something like credits. They're usually the big go-to. You'd be like, in Star Wars, it's what? It's Imperial credits or Republican credits. In Star Trek, no. There's absolutely no money in the Federation whatsoever. In fact, Jean-Luc Picard even says in First Contact, the acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force of our lives. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity. Now, this is in response to a question from someone from the 21st century asking, where's your money? Like, don't you people, this would have cost a lot of money. And Picard says, well, we don't have any money in the future.
Okay,
I absolutely, I don't reject this, but the idea that you can't, that there's no exchange of value occurring is just absolutely ridiculous.
Okay.
There's this idea that people will just work for free or they'll work for nothing. Doesn't make any sense. So
the exchange of value is how humans do things, right? If it's not through money, it's through bartering.
Yes.
Or something to that point. Or even in like socialistic societies, it's not the idea that I'll give you money to do this task, but you help me now and I'll help you at some point in the future. You know, we all help each other. It's the exchange of value.
What's the quote? From each of his own abilities to each of his own needs?
Well, it's supposed to be from each his ability to each his needs.
Yes, by Marx.
Yes.
The whole idea about there being no money in the Federation, most people agree it comes down to the replicators.
Okay.
The replicators are these wonderful devices that essentially can make food and drink out of thin air, and a lot of other things too, but there's some things they can't make.
And there's some things you can't kill them with, i.e. anything that's not a shotgun, right?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Stargate.
Oh, Stargate. Oh, okay. It's a joke about the replicators. Yes. Get it now. Lol.
Laugh your socks off.
Right. I am laughing.
Continue. So
I'm laughing at your joke, Joe.
So replicators...
It's funny. That's great. I love it. Anyway.
So replicators make a bunch of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, they make a bunch of stuff. So what that does is actually it increases basically the abundance of basic needs. Okay. Or basic products, so like food and drink and water.
Well, it doesn't increase the abundance of basic needs, it fulfills the basic needs.
Yes, it does. To the point where there's no actual point in trying to spend money in trying to sell these products that fulfill those needs because you can already get them out of thin air.
Everyone already has a replicator.
So what we assume then is that in the Federation, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the lowest level of needs is already satisfied. Now, Joe, did you want to explain briefly what the levels of the hierarchy needs are?
So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is it's a theory that this guy Maslow came up with a long time ago, and it basically outlines a theory for the way that humans are driven. You know, the needs pushing drives, basically. Yeah, you know, that's a dumb way of saying it, but anyway. So on the first layer, we have, you know, the physical needs, and then I always forget the order of this, but after the physical needs, like shelter and food and physiological needs, what's the next layer, Anthony?
Security.
Security. So security in the form of physical security? Does that also include mental security?
It's feeling safe.
Yes.
So it can be manifest as actual security but perceived security. And then, obviously, there's the other three layers, which are friendship and belongingness, social needs. Then you've got self-esteem, like the needs to feel good about yourself. And then self-actualization, which is helping out or doing a more nobler act or building up your character.
So the idea is that you need to fulfill a level before you move on to the next level.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be worrying about self-actualization when you can't even provide enough food to eat at nighttime.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to be as concerned about studying if the rent is due tomorrow, you know, so you're going to be more concerned with actually, you know, obviously trying to pay that rent instead of studying.
Of course.
Even though in the future that actually might be more beneficial to you. So anyway, the first level is physiological, and that's covered by the replicators providing a post-scarcity economy. There's no need to eat. There's no need to work for food. There's no need to work for something to drink. A lot of people, whenever you talk to them, if it's a job and they're not enjoying it, they'll say, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to eat any food? I used to work in Woolworths. I used to hear that all the time. Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to eat? Because then most people wouldn't work. Because it's fair enough, right? So what happens is, now that these needs are met, we still need a reason for people to actually do the nobler deeds in line with a Federation ideology. Just because your basic needs are met does not mean you're going to pursue nobler deeds that are in line with everyone else's. Yep. Your interpretation of nobility might be different. So what the Federation realizes is, after the replicators are created, that this is going to drive, basically completely obliterate the first level of needs, of physiological needs in their citizens. The next level is security. So that is going to become the most basic need people are going to have. So the Federation and the higher upper echelons have worked out a way of actually controlling their society. They do this by basically offering security, which is something that's now the most important need you can have, in exchange for sort of obedience to the state, as well as obtaining a role in Starfleet or other types of jobs. So because that also Starfleet offers you the opportunity to build up yourself, self-esteem, you go explore. It can make you feel better about yourself, but also advance humanity, which is your self-actualization.
Sure.
So this isn't like humanity has evolved. It's actually just Starfleet have realized that there's a little opportunity there to actually have a society that works together, because there's no longer a need to work for food, so they offer to provide security in exchange for a perceived nobler life. But in reality, there's still money. It's just that you're trading your own life and livelihood for security.
Yeah.
So that's what that theory is. It's because the idea is that we've evolved into these nobler humans. That's the idea. Oh, we're a nobler society. No, we're not. We still have those same basic needs into the future. It's just that the ruling government has realized that it can replace security with actual money.
Is that the end of your theory?
That's essentially the theory, yeah. The idea is, though, that because they don't actually have any money and they're providing everything, that they have to keep expanding as well to acquire new resources and new things to feed the empire. Same thing goes for Rome. Rome had to keep provided bread to all the poor people, and they had to keep providing bread to the poor people. And that's kind of what ended up ruining them.
Okay.
So they had to continually territorially expand so they could basically take in new resources. And once the Federation is finished with this expansion, it's going to start collapsing. So I'd say in 200 years, this little Federation experiment will go the way of the dodo.
You're saying that the Federation's going to collapse. Why exactly?
Well, because of basically supply and demand.
Okay. And how does that work?
How does supply and demand work?
Well, you're saying you can't say supply and demand.
Well, I can.
You have to say what supply and what demand.
Well, it's the inability to calculate supply and demand for most things, because everything is sort of done within this one government organization.
Yes.
Right? So there's also going to be a lot of times, so that they're going to be basically ordering things, and they're going to be providing them to their citizens. Because they're doing some centralized planning of their economy, they're not going to be able to calculate supply and demand, or the little minutia that is eradicated usually through competition. And that's usually what happens to centralized planning governments. Either they allow for like a small section of their society to have like a capitalist free enterprise, like in China, the Guangxi region, I think, is free market. So it's a little tiny pocket where you're allowed to do capitalism. The rest of it's all communism, but you can do this one little part in China. That's fine. You can do some capitalism there. Or you go collapse like the USSR because it couldn't provide... those little minutiae got into the system and it just totally ate it up.
Okay.
Right? Whereas in capitalism, competition tends to eradicate that, because those that can't calculate it properly, they tend to just die. Or at least their companies do. So that's the real issue.
Cool. Well, I have no idea how I'm going to edit that mess into something.
I'm not going to edit that into something.
But what about the replicators? You said that the replicators could provide basic needs. Doesn't that surpass the limits of the controlled supply and demand?
No, because there's still stuff people need to build. Like they need to get iron ore out of the ground. And not only in the Federation, but in other countries, in other planets. I'm sure people in the Federation could work all just for the Federation. But do you think people in a far-off planet within the Federation space are going to be happy with the idea of just working for free? I highly doubt it.
Sure.
And they're going to have to build these giant spaceships. They're going to have to get those minerals from somewhere. That's the idea. So it's not going to be the human race that maybe destabilizes the Federation. It might end up being other aliens who say, well, we're working for the Federation and we have no real representation in the Federation. They're not the same culture. They probably, some of them even might be like the Ferengi, who are super capitalists, and be like, I don't like the idea that we're gotten rid of money. I think that's stupid.
Okay, so we've got another theory here, and this one was written into us by somebody who knew that we were doing Star Trek, and they wrote into us on one of the many forms of social media that you can, and this one comes specifically from Janine on Facebook, somebody who loves Star Trek Next Generation, and she says, I've got a theory that outlines how Star Trek, or as a whole, not just Star Trek Next Gen, but Star Trek as a whole outlines the entire progress of the human race in the way that the races are introduced to it. And I was intrigued, so I read a bit more. And basically, she says each time a race is introduced in Star Trek, it's another milestone in human evolution.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that happens in Star Trek history, the first major thing is that they lived in tribes and cities of underdeveloped people. Okay, so this is before they had the warp drive. They couldn't do space travel, and she says this is equivalent to the European and Central Asian countries prior to the invention of democracy. Okay, bit of a weak link there, but we'll keep going through. It gets stronger as we go. And the next one says that humans invent the warp drive in a specific year. She hasn't mentioned it, and I haven't seen the show, so I can't tell you, but I'm sure that Anthony could.
I couldn't tell you.
No, because you're not a big enough Star Trek fan.
I'm clearly not. It's like 2063. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's that.
Okay, sure. And they invent the warp drive and make first contact with the Vulcans. Okay, and she's saying this is equivalent to when democracy was invented. She's saying this is equivalent to when democracy was invented, ushering in the Greek city-states and the birth of the Western society. Okay, this is supported by the Vulcans' nature as a rational and logical being. This is supported by the Vulcans' nature as a rational and logical race like those in ancient Athens. The next big step in Star Trek is meeting the Klingons and then the Romulans, which Janine says are like the barbarians and Romans, respectively. So the Klingons are a warlike race. They're like the barbarians that plagued the early Western societies, and the Romulans are based on Romans. And you know,
that's totally true. Yeah,
it's similar to the Greek state thing, but they're a little bit more warlike. You know,
it's actually funny because like the Romulans were started by Vulcans who left. Two Vulcans, two Vulcans who left, and they set up their own. Who left Vulcan and set up a new planet, new race or new empire on two planets called Romulus and Remus.
Yes.
So it's
it's obvious.
It's obvious. It's very obvious. So that's great. Actually, that kind of works. Yeah.
There's a 100-year period where there's no more significant races, and they're saying, Janine says this is the transition from the fall of Rome through the Dark Ages and moving towards Enlightenment, and then that's when Star Trek, our series, meets Q at the beginning of Next Gen, and she's saying this is almost the renaissance of the times, and so there's a deep enlightenment. There's a whole bunch of thinkers that arise. They start to make change. You know, this is leaving the feudal system behind and moving into a more modern system of government through that special enlightenment that came in the Renaissance. And then around that same time, then we meet the Ferengi, and then a little bit later on, the Borg. So the Ferengi are representing a shift in economic thinking from mercantilism to laissez-faire capitalism, which is, you know, something that I know and love. And then we also have the Borg, who we meet a little bit later on, and they're kind of the same as communism, okay? So these two conflicting ideologies, and this communism believes that, you know, we're all a part of a larger system working together for the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
You know, these two major ideologies and how they butt against each other. And then the Borg start to bring in more planets. They take over a whole bunch of places, and then they force a place called the Alpha Quadrant to unite and then to fight the enemy of communism.
Yes.
Okay, so capitalism, communism are obviously at odds.
Yeah.
And so communism has to fight capitalism, and it's almost like a pit fight. You know, you put in your two favorite fighters, who's going to win?
It's kind of like the Cold War, but it's more like a hot Cold War.
A hot Cold War?
Yeah.
So it's a war.
It's a war, yes. But it's war between communism and the capitalist West.
Yes. And then lastly, Janine says we've got the Kardashians and the Dominions.
Yes.
Okay, so the Kardashians are a group of people that are on the news all the time. They're always marrying people and having babies, and people love them. I don't know why. Is it their brunette hair?
Oh, you think...
I don't know.
That's different. That they're different Kardashians, but
okay, that's a different Kardashian.
As far as actually, you know, it's funny about Kardashians. There's a show Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I thought it was actually about the Star Trek race called the Kardashians, which surprised me when I found out it was actually a woman called Kim Kardashian. I was like, oh, okay, that does not look like a Kardashian. I can tell you that much.
So the Kardashians are totalitarians, as we know that.
Oh, absolutely, we know that's just true in both worlds.
And they consider service to the state a great honor. And Janine says here that they could be Nazis.
They pretty much are Nazis.
Pretty much?
They're pretty much Nazis.
Okay. They're pretty innocent looking for Nazis.
Well, okay, so yeah, they can be, but they're always on the news. They're always occupying it, you know, with their Lugan Press about, you know, their babies and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then we have the Dominion, and they're aristocrats, where they have an elite rule, and they declare war on the entire Federation and the Alpha Quadrant, and everyone has to unite to try and fight the domination.
Yeah.
The Dominion.
The Dominion, yeah.
Yeah. And Janine says this could be interpreted as the modern rise of populism in the left and right political spectrum, with the great enemy being the elites. So we've moved from this idea of communism versus capitalism to this idea of aristocracy versus totalitarianism.
Yeah, because communism dies, and the Borg, I guess, they don't really they're there, but they're not as present in the Alpha Quadrant prior to the Dominion Wars, and then everyone's has to join together to fight the Dominions, which is the elites.
Yeah, and Janine's got a little stinger at the end here, and she says the preferred method of combat by the elites is lies and deception.
Yep.
Fake news.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, look at you, Janine.
Election rigging, Democratic National Convention. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, that makes sense. I buy that. That's a good theory, Janine.
So thanks on your ideas of an alternate way to look at Star Trek, as each race and each progression is, a reflection on the history of Star Trek, which make a history of humanity, which makes sense because even in the first episode of Next Gen, we have Q he's trying to communicate with Picard through the different being a different captain of different eras. So he's a ship captain, and then he's something else captain.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, I think that's a good theory. Like,
Cool.
It's a great way to watch it. I don't think you could watch the show as it, because you'd have to watch a lot of TV and be like, here comes the Romans. But it's a good, sort of thought experiment, if you will, or a little pondering.
Sure.
I like that idea. It's great, Janine.
Okay, we've got a bit of a shorter one here, and this one comes from Lucas on Twitter, and Lucas says, Picard has PTSD. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Lucas. And Anthony, you did a bit of digging on this one.
I did.
And you kind of fleshed it out a bit more for us.
Yeah, actually, it kind of makes sense that he has PTSD. So after his first abduction with... he meets Q. The second time he meets Q, actually. Q essentially introduces him to the Borg, and the Borg abduct him and assimilate him. And then from then on, his encounters with Q become far more grander. He's put on trial and persecuted, and then he also seems to have hallucinations and just a mad lust to destroy the Borg. And to me, I get this idea that he actually suffered some serious post-traumatic stress disorder based on his first encounter with the Borg, which wasn't caused by Q at all. Okay? That didn't happen. It's just that he blames Q for it. Because how could he, a captain, get abducted? How did that happen? How could he do that to himself? These are questions that people with PTSD will probably ask themselves. They'll suffer hallucinations as well, and obviously they can go fly into a rage because, they've suffered some serious pain in the past. And I think maybe Q is actually a stand-in for a question, as in, why was I abducted and why was I attacked?
Sure.
I like that idea that he's got PTSD.
Well, it kind of ties in with another idea that we have, and this one comes in on our Facebook page from somebody called Danielle, and she says, I love Star Trek Next Generation. It's one of my favorite shows. I'd just like to say that I think Picard and Q are gay lovers.
Oh yeah, that's totally true. I'm not even gonna deny that. That just makes
whatever
sense.
Floats your boat. Perhaps the Q in Q could stand for the Q in questioning.
Ah, like LGBTIQQ. So he's the end Q, right?
He's one of the Qs.
He's one of the Qs, which makes sense because they're members of the Q continuum.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sure, Picard could easily be Q's mistress. Why not?
Oh, totally. That's a good theory. And I'm sorry, but that's probably everyone thinks that, right?
Do they?
There's times where you're like, that's a little gay. That's a little gay. All right, Q. I'm going to be honest. The way you're trying to talk to him and all that comes off a little gay.
Well, Star Trek's all about diversity and acceptance.
Yeah.
Why not?
There's no gay characters in Star Trek Next Gen. Maybe there is.
There's well, in the first episode of Star Trek Next Generation, the only episode I watched, there was a man in a miniskirt. So there you go.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
He was just walking along in Star Trek miniskirt. It was the uniform miniskirt.
That's weird.
That's just in the show.
That's just that's the way it is, man.
Acceptance, man.
That is the future.
This is modern society that we all live in.
We're all going into the trans-dimensional warp modern society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This brings us to our final segment of the show, which is All in His Head, the segment of the show where we try and convince you that a certain show or movie all takes place within the realms of one character's head. So who is it this week that we're talking about, Anthony?
That's a toughie. I'm going to say it's all in Wesley Crusher's head. And by that, I mean he's actually pretending he's on an exciting USS Enterprise All right.
Okay.
But he's actually on the holodeck. Now, Wesley Crusher is a kid, basically, in Star Trek. He's like, I think, 12 or 14. So he's on the holodeck because there's nothing else to do on the damn ship. And whilst Star Trek is actually just a regular, most boring, incredibly boring thing to be, it's kind of like being in the Navy where it's just like, it's okay. But it's not every bloody day you go and shoot shells at people. No. I assume a lot of it involves just driving. What do you call it when you're on a boat?
Motoring
on a boat.
And you're probably shooting torpedoes, not shells. I feel like shells are probably not the greatest thing to be shooting at people.
You got like Tomahawk missiles.
Let's load the conch. Load the conch, boys.
Load it.
Gonna take it down.
Well, I was gonna say they've got Tomahawk missiles and whatever Sidewinder.
That's torpedoes.
No, torpedoes go in the bloody water. Tomahawk missiles.
Talking about the Navy.
Yeah, they have Tomahawk missiles. They fire up there, and they hit other people. They fly up in the air and they come down and they fucking blow shit up.
You're making a lot of words, but I don't know what any of it means.
You do aerial bombardments with fucking Navy. Anyway, point is, it's not going to be as interesting as Wesley Crusher imagines it to be. So he's on the holodeck, basically fantasizing that all the events of Star Trek are taking place, when in reality, he's just on a boring ship that's doing routine exploration and routine motoring. Makes way more sense, actually, that way, because how the hell is every single episode about a new monster that comes along?
Why is a 12-year-old boy working for Starfleet anyway?
Because his mum is the chief medical officer. Oh, he's also supposed to be what's that thing called? A wonderkin?
Oh, okay.
You know what that is?
He's a really smart child.
Yeah, a really smart child. Maybe they just tell him he's really smart, and maybe Wesley Crusher isn't smart at all. He's just a special child.
It's just child labor.
It's just well, yeah, and it's like this is why Picard doesn't like the child. He's not actually that special or great. It's just that he gets in the way, and he kind of wants to bang Wesley Crusher anyway. Beverly Crusher. Okay,
that's a very different scenario. And that brings us to the end of Abstract Nonsense, the Fan Theories and Alternate Readings podcast. If you want to hear more of these, you can go to our website, or you can also find us on Facebook. And most of these things, just type into your local search engine, just type in Abstract Nonsense Fan Theories podcast, and we should be up there.
Yep, there'll be a whole bunch of links in this podcast. You just follow them as well.
Yeah, and the show notes.
Go to our website as well. Notes. Go to our web zone. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's what the fuck was it again? Oh, yes. It's fantheoriespodcast.com. It's www.fantheoriespodcast.com.
Fantheoriespodcast.com. And that brings us to the end of this week. Hope you had a fun time. If we missed anything, send them in, because we will revisit this at some point. Once I've watched more Star Trek Next Generation. Anthony's seen it all. I've seen nothing. You've probably seen more than both of us put together, which means you probably watched the series multiple times. Anyway, if you have any more, send them in. We'll come back to it.
Let's just face it. Let me just point out something. All I'd have to do to watch it, to do that, to combine both you and I watching more than that.
Watch one more episode.
Just watch one more episode of Star Trek Next Gen again.
Just watch the first episode again.
Yeah, pretty much. And I've pretty much doubled Joe's watching.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, let's leave it there. Thanks very much for listening. My name's Joe Lewis.
And I'm Anthony Bill.
Thanks very much for listening to Abstract Nonsense. Have a great week and stay abstract.